So as is appropriate, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I tested it, but I wanted to be sure. For context, I teach professional development. It's a one credit course in the Haslam College of Business. It's part of a 4-course series for our students that's mandatory. It's called Professional Communication and Ethical Leadership. Each course has 50 students enrolled, but I teach 3 to 4 classes a semester. So in essence, I have a class of 150 to 200 students once I merge my Canvas shells. And then I coordinate, the other instructors, 20 plus instructors who also teach that class. So there's my context. What's my answer to the 3 things? Communication, excitement, and personalization. If I compare the asynchronous experience to the in-person teaching experience, week 1 was a big focus on the syllabus, expectations, where to be, what to do, and all of that still matters in the asynchronous format and is still important, but the delivery of that is mission critical. So communication, once your students think you're absent, they're absent and they're harder to get back in an asynchronous format. I tend to be more expressive, making sure I use my hands, that I'm human, and sit down with myself and make sure that I'm excited to be recording my welcome video and let them know that I'm excited. I'm looking forward to working with you. Make sure you use my office hours and really center myself to ensure that I am as comfortable as possible, which it gets better over time, with being excited and making sure that the communication and personalization is spot on. If I were to forget to even give them a syllabus, I could still pull it off for the whole semester if I get those 3 things right during the first week. The excitement door closes faster in an asynchronous class. So that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Michelle and Jennifer, do you have anything to add here?
I'll go ahead. Um, I totally agree with everything Melissa said. I couldn't have probably said that better. I tried to think of something since I knew I wasn't going first on this one that would be a little further down. And so my 3 things are no errors in my module 0, module 1, because you're building a lot of trust, right? And if students see that your modules have errors, they start to wonder, do you really know what's going on? So locking those down like they are, there's no typos, everything's going to load, double, triple, quadruple check it. Making sure that my introductory message is clear about what to do, and is welcoming to students so that they're not guessing, well, what should I do next? Very, very clear and consistent. And then how everyone knows how to reach me. I try to really stress I'm a real faculty, even though you maybe not be in Knoxville. I'm not in Knoxville. I kind of try to fake it out with my stuff in the mirror, and lots of UTK clothing. But I try to make sure they know that I'm really a faculty and this is my full-time job. And they're not bothering me reaching out to me, and they know how to. Those would be my 3 real high priorities.
The excitement piece of the puzzle is definitely a big one, and that window seems to be getting shorter and shorter every single semester. And so that is a critical component. I'll just echo what was said earlier. I think the other one that isn't on there yet is communicating in different ways. So some students only check Canvas mail, some students only check their regular email. And so making sure, and some people only come to Canvas and look at the front page. So making sure all of that information is in all 3 of those places on day 1 or even the night before day 1, I think is a critical component of getting started on the right foot.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a strong supporter as well of the multiple places to find that critical information. And I am certainly in agreement. I think we've got some agreement too in the chat about just the excitement factor with online courses. And again, for those of you who are watching, if you have any follow-up questions or comments, please feel free to share them in the chat. Our second question, Michelle, if you would lead this off for us, what is one low effort, high impact activity you use in the first week to get students actively participating rather than passively observing? So this really speaks to that, getting them connected.
First, let me give you a little bit of background about the kinds of courses that I teach. I'm in a relatively small department, and so all of our courses cap at 35 students. And as a tenure line faculty member, I only teach 2 classes per semester. So the max number of students that I would ever have asynchronously is 70, and more than likely it's only going to be 35 because they prefer us to teach also one residential course. So I'm working with a much smaller group of people, and the items that I'm going to talk about probably work significantly better in smaller environments than they do in larger environments. My low impact item is a survey for all of the students to fill out about their experiences and their expectations coming into the class. I want to know which students are first time asynchronous learners. I want to know what else is going on in their world. I want to know what makes them unique as a learner. So all of those things go into that low impact Qualtrics survey that I can quickly download and scan for important information. In terms of high impact, I've changed my introductions system. It used to be that students were allowed to type an introduction about themselves, their name, their major, all of those kinds of things. And as my own children have taken asynchronous classes, I've learned a lot about the things that they really hate. And so instead of here's who I am and all of this information about me, I start off with they have to come up with an image that represents them. They can do it in video, they can take an image off the internet, they can show us, they can upload a picture of themselves, and then they need to explain to the class what it is about that picture that will help the other students remember who they are. And that's the critical component. It's getting them to think about what makes them unique, what is their uniqueness in this particular class, so that other students can remember who they are. And when they're responding to them or interacting with them or working in group projects with them, they can say, oh, you were the one who had X image. So my image is Snoopy laying on the top of his doghouse and it's snowing out. Because unlike this winter, I truly miss my winters in Pennsylvania where we got lots and lots of snow. That's not been the case this winter here, but normally that is not as common. And then after all of those images have been posted, I then open it up for replies so that the students have to go read all of the items and then look for people and attempt to make connections with some of those images. So that's how I've changed up the introductions piece. And it has turned out, it's low maintenance for me, but it seems to help them get connected to each other and see where they have overlap.
That is awesome. I like that you said you wait until everyone has contributed to really give that holistic picture. I think a lot of times with the discussions and the intros, we don't necessarily get that. So I like that feature a lot. Michelle, or not Michelle, I'm sorry. Michelle, you just spoke. Melissa and Jennifer, that has been getting me for the past month. Melissa and Jennifer, what would you like to add here?
I think that like most of us, the course is set up in modules. And so an assignment might be due Monday night, and then Tuesday, I have time set aside that I start grading. But during the first week, I grade every day so that I can positively reinforce the students who are already in there doing the work. My first career, I was a therapist, so that psychology, positive behavior reinforcement is coming out. And then in asynchronous courses, we are big on, at least, that midweek check-in communication. So in that midweek announcement that I do during week one, I acknowledge I've already been grading your assignments. Those of you, I give positive reinforcement that people are in the class doing the work. We're communicating. And hopefully that inspires the people who are still like, I need to get to that, to get to it a little sooner. And if they're hesitant or resistant, hopefully it shows them that, oh, people are already in the class, they're already doing the work, they're already talking to the instructor. It's safe emotionally to show up.
I just want to say I love the idea of the image, and I suspect quite a few people, Michelle, will be stealing that idea moving forward. So you get credit for that if it starts showing up across the campus. I'll tell you a little bit about myself in the next question because I'm up first on that one. But because my classes aren't quite as big as Melissa's, I started a couple of semesters ago requiring video introductions, and the discussion boards across the board in my asynchronous classes are video. And students are often hesitant at first; they're not sure they want to do it, and then my evaluation comments, I get that comment that will say, I wasn't sure about this. I really wasn't sure I wanted to do it, but I really felt much more engaged in an asynchronous course because I was listening to each other. Side note, it's harder for me to grade than reading the writing ones because I have to watch all these videos, but students like that they're talking to each other. And so that has worked quite well as a lower effort. It's a little more grading, but for students, and they're so younger ones especially are so comfortable just pulling out their phone and making a quick video. So it's a comfort level for them.
Yes, I think we had a comment in the chat that there's a lot of humanizing and instructor presence factors coming in here right from the start, and I'd like to echo that in these responses as well. And like you said, Jennifer, if you would lead for the next question, what signals do you look for in the first 2 weeks to tell whether your students are truly engaged or really kind of starting to drift?
So now I get to tell you a little bit about the classes I teach. I teach in the Masters of Public Health program. We are a fast-growing digital learning program. We have about 141 students, but I just teach in that, and so my class sizes are usually between 30 and 45, so not nearly as big as Melissa's, but I teach biostatistics, which can be a challenging course to teach online. I teach sometimes epidemiology, not so much anymore, but for many semesters, assessment and planning, which is a writing intensive course, sometimes program evaluation, research methods, so some pretty heavy topics. I also teach a summer book club that is fully asynchronous, and I love it. And I've taught that one for a long time. So lots of different types of classes, but around that 30 to 45 size. I will admit that I am glued to Canvas metrics, especially the first 2 or 3 weeks. So it is nothing for me to check my metrics at least daily. I know that I have a student in my biostats class that in the first 2 weeks has only engaged for 38 minutes and 14 seconds. And I have a student in research methods that has engaged for 15 minutes and 45 seconds. I know that because I look every day, and they've both received emails already today that say, I really need you to be engaging a little bit more in this material. We're in week 2 and you really haven't spent enough time. So for me, that's probably the most important signal is, are they in there? Are they watching? I always used to put my videos out on YouTube and put links, not open up to everybody, closed YouTube. But I use Panopto now because I can see the analytics. And so I have a student that came to the last 7 minutes of biostats this week. So I went to the Panopto Analytics. She hasn't watched the recording of the class meeting. It's not an asynchronous class, but it only meets for an hour a week. But I can see, if I have videos that, even in an asynchronous class that show them how to do something, if they're not watching those videos, then I know they're not prepared for the assignment. So the metrics to me, that's my life, and I'm in there. So it's the first thing I look at in the morning. It's the last thing I look at before I go to bed. And I also look at, like, I have support discussion boards. I look at those continuously. I try to respond to emails and questions on the discussion board real time. In the first couple of weeks, I don't do this all the way through the semester, but the first couple of weeks, I send a midweek checking up and a Friday checking up. How's everything going? Does anybody need anything? Remember, here's my office hours. And as I alluded to, I send personalized messages to students that are, that I'm concerned or not engaged. Now, I'm not, like, you're going to fail this class. I'm just saying I'm a little worried. Is there, are you okay? Do you not know how to do something? Do you want to come and talk to me? Just so that they know I'm aware of what's going on and I'm paying attention so that, and I don't want them to feel like I'm like big brother, but at the same time, I want them to know I care and I'm not just, I'm not an adjunct who's like showing up once in a while. I'm really here and I see you and I want to know, what I can do to help you. So that helps a lot.
Awesome. So live by the metrics for sure. So we have a question in the chat that says, is the Canvas metric an accurate measure of engagement? Just out of pure curiosity, for example, can a student have it open on their browser but not be doing class-related work and it shows up as time on Canvas? There's one response that says you can see how many page clicks. So can you tell us a little bit more about what other features maybe the metrics have that kind of help you tease apart what you're seeing there a little bit?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So a student could open it up and just show that they've been in there and I have students, it's like, it's the second week. You have not been spending 800 hours in there. So, they just leave it open. But as Barbara said, who's one of my colleagues, hello, Barbara, it'll show what pages they went to. So if they're just clicking like the home page and then the syllabus page and back and forth, you can see that like where they're going. You can also, as I said with Panato, you can see if they've watched the video down to how many minutes they've watched. So I have some videos this week in biostats that show them how to do the lab. It walks them through the lab, and I can tell if they've watched 1 minute or all 14 minutes. I can tell how many times they've watched the video. So that helps quite a bit, especially in those areas where, like in biostats, those videos are there to help them get through their first lab where they're installing the program and doing the very basic work that they probably have no idea how to do. If and it doesn't just help me to know if they're engaged, it also helps me. I had a student last week who emailed me and said, I can't figure out the lab. And I went to Panopto and they had not watched the video. And I said, did you notice there's a video at the bottom of the page that walks you through it? I didn't even notice that. And so, so I was able to, by knowing she didn't watch the video, I was able to nudge her in the right direction. Her original email said, I'm not going to get my lab turned in on time. She actually turned it in on time. She just didn't know she wasn't catching something. So those metrics are available, like they help me in so many ways, just kind of gauge what's going on. But yeah, they're not perfect. And of course they don't tell me, they don't scan the retina. So I know they went to the page. It doesn't tell me if they read the page, it doesn't tell me if they read the textbook, but it does give me some additional information.
And then one quick follow-up. Can you see the time each student watches, or how can you see the time a student watches a Panopto video?
I mean, I can show you. Is it okay to show like a screen or is that for
Why not?
Okay, let me just pull up my
Well,
biostats class. I'll share my screen. Wait, I have to hide
I'm
my.
going to pause the recording really quick for that. Awesome. Thank you.
I took a lot of time. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna say we've talked a good bit about metrics, and I think they can be useful. Sally also says in the chat that she uses embedded quizzes, so they have to get to the end of the video before moving on to the next thing. Melissa and Michelle, what would you like to add for this question?
On all of so metrics, embedded quizzes, all useful tools that I also use. In addition to that, I also surrendered my idea that I needed to make sure I was in their house in their house, making sure they do what they're supposed to do. And when I train new instructors, I always tell them, when we're standing in front of the classroom, we give ourselves credit. We assume that if they're looking at us, they're listening. And we need to accept the fact that that's just not true. And just accept the fact that some people may actually be watching it and also making a to-do list about something unrelated. And on our end, it's create the accompanying assignment in a way that it really you can't complete the deliverable successfully if you don't learn the new material first. So that's mine.
I don't have anything else to add.
All good. Yes, lots of great points here for sure. So Melissa, while we're speaking with you, if you want to lead off for the next question is, what communication norms do you explicitly set at the beginning of the course, and how do these norms help prevent issues later?
Okay, so I love this question. I'm one of the ones who was hired to be in person. We all transitioned online, and due to a lot of external factors, mine stayed online, completely changed the trajectory of my teaching career, and I couldn't be more excited about it. Just one of the best things that's happened to my career. What I noticed first is I was getting questions from, maybe if we think back to that bell curve, maybe the bottom 25%. And I don't understand the assignment. Can you tell me what to do? And at some point I was like, I think that students are asking me questions, so I will summarize the information, and therefore they don't have to read all of the instructions. It was just a hunch based on some of these questions I had. And I was just re-explaining myself. Well, fortunately for me, I work in a college of business. I have worked in outside of higher education in both nonprofit and for-profit organizations. So I took that experience and created a communication method for the class that they're required to use when they ask questions. And it's in the syllabus for all the instructors, because it is a foundational expectation in the business world that when you go to ask, if you're assigned a project, you don't go to the vice president and say, I don't know what to do. Can you re-explain it? They don't like time wasters. You walk in, you say, here's what I've done so far. Here's where I'm stuck. You said this. I don't understand that. How does it apply? So in the course communication method, it says, and I have it in front of me, so I'm just going to look at it real quick. In addition to the college expectations of you start with a professional greeting and always use a respectful tone. I layered in, ask questions with supporting details. For example, instead of what kind of photo do I need for my LinkedIn assignment, your question might sound something like, the LinkedIn assignment says no prom pictures, but my picture's from a wedding, not prom. Is that okay? That's a very low-hanging basic question. And asking questions from this informed standpoint is a kind of a basic price of entry professionalism standard in business. And if a student is too vague, the first time I will answer their question and then remind them to go back to the syllabus and remind them that I'm not trying to not answer their question, but I'm also simultaneously teaching them. Our course is professional communication as part of the course. So I'm teaching them that skill in how they ask the questions. And that completely changed my teaching experience. I enjoy answering questions now as opposed to before I did that. So that is my answer to the question that I will shout to the rooftops.
Awesome.
I'm just going to say one of the things that I do very early on is make my students aware of what my weekly schedule typically looks like, because I don't just teach asynchronously and because I have other responsibilities on campus. I give them a basic map of, this is when my scheduled meetings typically are, this is when I teach in person, and that seems to help them understand that if I email her while she's teaching in person, I'm not going to get a quick reply. So setting that up. But the other thing that I do about communication is I tell them when my downtimes are, because I want them to understand that there is a work-life balance. And so, for example, I don't respond to email on Saturdays. Nothing is due on Saturdays, and I don't respond to email on Saturdays. That's my family day. And I want them to understand they should also have personal days or personal time, not just class time, even though they're free to work on things whenever is convenient for them.
Okay, well, this is hard to follow up with work-life balance because while I agree with you, you're going to be horrified at what I'm going to say. Um, I try to be really, really clear up front with my students that whenever they're working, if they need help, they don't have I don't want them to walk away and not come back, right? So what I do is I try to really express to them the different ways that they can get help. One way is every one of my classes has a Q&A discussion board, and I tell students in the very beginning, this is how we build community. So I encourage students, if they're working at their homework on 2 a.m. on Tuesday, I won't be up, but they can post their question and maybe somebody else is up. And I ask the other students, help each other. And that really does build that sense of community, especially because like in biostats, I get them in the first part of the program, and then they get to know each other. And when they take another class, they know each other. So, and this is the part you're going to hate, Michelle. I also tell my students my office hours, I do Zoom drop-in office hours. I do a minimum of 12 hours a week. Last fall, I added it up for my promotion packet, 179.5 hours of office hours. What am I doing with that? I'm setting the expectation that I'm available. Now, if it's not office hours, I'll answer them as I'm able to. I'm busy right now. I'm not going to answer student emails, right? So, but during those 12 hours a week, I'm in front of Zoom and I'm available. So, and some of them are evening, like before I teach class or after I teach class, some are in the morning. Today was 9:30 to 11:30. So during that time, they don't have to schedule any time. They can just pop in and pop out. And what I find is students don't just go, well, I can only talk to my instructor on Tuesday between 3 and 4 o'clock, so I just can't get help. No, I'm here. The other thing it helps with is occasionally you get those students to the end of the semester and they didn't do anything. And I can turn around and, I can gently say, well, I was here for 179 and a half hours this semester, and I keep a log, and you didn't come to office hours. So where was your part? When I do my informal surveys in weeks 4 and 10, the first question is, what support systems built into the course have you used so far? Discussion board, emailing the instructor, one-on-one visits, or office hours, because I want them to reflect on if they're going to say they're not doing well in the class and they don't understand what's going on. I want them to first think, wait a minute, I didn't check any of those boxes. So I set that expectation right up front. I'm here and I'm giving you my time. You've got to give it back to me.
All right. I like the connection of your responses in these questions here.
Can I just add really quick? I did it at 9:30 to 11:30 this morning and had one visitor. So it was great grading time. It's not like I'm pronged all the time.
So we have a couple of folks saying, let's see, did an availability poll for office hours. Melissa in the chat says she launched a course-specific GPT for common tech questions. I'm sure some folks might be really interested to see that. So let's see. Speaking of kind of course elements and course structure, and Jennifer, since you kind of wrapped it up there, if you want to continue on with the next question is, when students enter your Canvas course for the very first time, what do you want them to understand right away, and how do you ensure that that happens?
So I think for me, it's organization, organization, organization. The second part, there's a little sub question, and is there an elephant in your first lesson that students referred to as especially helpful? Organization, in my course feedback, that's one of the number one things, how organized my course is, how consistent and structured it is. Video guides from the beginning, especially like in biostats, right? How to do things, lots of videos. Last week I had a student that emailed me a question and I just stopped and made a video and uploaded it. So lots of responsive videos. So those are office hours. I always get responses back that they like, even if a lot of students will say, I didn't come to a lot of office hours, but I always knew they were there. And the last thing for me is crazy. I have for the past decade, this is the one I always get comments on. I have a page at the beginning of every module. It's a little box on the front page, the introductory page that says, what's due this week. And it just has a list of what's due this week with the links to the assignments. To me, it's a throwaway thing. Like I just put it on there the first time I taught a class. I would never do without it because students comment on it all the time. They've got the syllabus, they've got that calendar, but for some reason, I get comments every semester on students saying, thank you for the what's due this week. It kept me together. So I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a big deal to me, but students seem to love it.
Absolutely. I'm gonna guess that's your most impactful element that students have referred to in your class for sure. Seems like yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's fairly like it's on your syllabus
Yeah.
in the schedule. I don't know
Yeah.
why. What's due this week? Maybe it's because it feels so frank. It's not like lots of fancy words. What's due this week? It's very direct, but for some reason that's one of that in office hours and the structure are probably the three most things that I get back.
Awesome. Okay, so Michelle and Melissa, same question to you. And if you want to add, if there's one element that students have identified as most impactful.
Um, you know, the question is, what do we want them to know? And for me, trying to help them, I want them to know they need to use that modules button link in the left column, not just the calendar. That's the most important. The class is designed for students to learn, not complete assignments. And I have a lot of photos with arrows and quick, like Jennifer, quick screencasts. When you're teaching asynchronous online, the faster you can do a screencast or grab a screenshot and convert it to a photo quickly, your life will be much easier. So that's mine. Trying to get them away from just going to that calendar is.
Don't have anything else to add.
All right, then Michelle, if you would lead for our next question, which is what's one element of course organization or structure that you think instructors might underestimate in its impact on student success?
I'm going to be really brief about this one because I want to get to the last question that we were all asked to answer. Um, and this is a little bit different, I think, than kind of what Melissa is emphasizing with the modules. I put all of the information in as many places as I can. So there's an announcement, there's a piece at the beginning of each module that it's on their calendars, and it's on the front page of the course on the homepage. So every assignment that is due appears in all four of those places for students, and the announcements go out directly to them via email, both their UTK email and their Canvas email each week. And that type of organization and over communication has served me well.
I think for me, I'm just going to go back to how important it is. Students want consistency and organization. And, students don't even know they want it until they go to a class that's not organized. And I have students will come back and say, I miss biostats. And I'm not sure they miss biostats, but they may have gone on to a class that isn't quite as organized. And what they miss is the predictability in the organization and sticking to that then, right? Like not like opening them up randomly modules and things like that, but this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it and you can trust me. And then when you have me again for another class, that's what's going to be. And I think that's underappreciated for newer instructors to understand how much, especially an adult learner in an online environment, needs to know that the rules aren't going to change every single week.
Yeah,
I'm just
absolutely.
going to apply what Michelle and Jennifer have shared already. When I have new instructors to the program who I recruit and coordinate and train, often I forgot to, if you pick your day and that's when your week starts. That's the expectation. And often the new instructors have to learn that the hard way. I can train them, but their first semester feedback will say something to the effect of, She didn't launch the modules on time. I didn't know where to go. So that's just a reinforcement to what they already said.
I know we want to get to that last question, but I just want to say we actually had an instructor in our program that we said, don't open all the modules first week, or you'll have students going through and rushing through. And it was, oh no, the students will love it. And we said, trust us, we're veteran DE students, don't, or instructors, don't do it. And she did it, and she had a student before the semester started spend like, I don't know, it was like 3 hours in the module and turn in every single assignment, including the end of semester, what did you learn reflective assignment. And, it's kind of like, well, I guess you learned. So that learning on your, have to learn it the hard way sometimes is true.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I feel like this question has so much hype now. So the last preset question that we had before we get to some of the questions that have been left in our chat here, for all of you, what's one practice that you initially resisted, but now you wouldn't teach online without?
I feel like I'm really excited to hear what Michelle has to say because she's wanted to go. So I'm just kind of waiting.
I'll be happy to start. The thing that I would now no longer do without, the thing that I changed was discussion board posts and replies. And I would never, ever, ever go back to you must post and then you must reply to two people as kind of the form of engagement for discussion posts. And so what I've done in my upper level classes is I've created discussion moderators for each week. And so it is the discussion moderator's job to make sure that people are being responded to as they post information. And then at the end of the week, it's everyone's responsibility to go back and read the full discussion board. And other than the moderators, they are to turn in an assignment that summarizes what they got out of the discussions and what questions they still have about the content related to that chapter's discussion. And I would never, ever go back to what my children reply to or what my children talk about as spit out the words and then tell two people that their spit out words work.
I think my mind's being blown right with this idea right now. So one just quick follow-up question is, how big of a class does this work with?
I have 35. And that's what it works. It works fine for me at 35. I don't think it would work at 150. You would have to split them up differently and you'd have to design the discussion boards a little bit differently so that they were working in smaller compacts.
Yes, and I see that's what Jennifer's added in the chat is making facilitator groups.
I did that. I did that over the summer with, or I'm sorry, over the fall with my Epi of Aging, because I wanted them to, partly I just wanted them to see what it's like when you have to make people engage, right? And so I gave them an article and they had to come up with some questions and then the students had to respond to at least one of the prompts. But then the facilitators were in charge of engaging everybody throughout the week. And I got a lot of comments like, I didn't realize how hard this was. So it was a good lesson in that respect, but also the conversations, because it was the students, I think, responded to the prompts better because they were from the students to the students, and that was really interesting. So I love that idea. I'm just going to, since I've got my mic on and then I can turn mine off for good, I'll just answer that. When I first started my program, I was convinced that I could teach my classes 100% async and just answer emails. And that was like that, we had Noodle and they were like, that's what you're going to do. And I'm like, yep, that will work. And I very quickly realized that even students in asynchronous classes want interaction. And so the one thing I would never get rid of, even though I know I see people cringe when I say that I do it, is my office hours. I'm there, and sometimes students just come in, and I have a student that has gotten into chickens. She comes in about every other week and shows me her chickens. That's fine. I've met her mom, her dad, her grandmother, her aunt, all her dogs, and her chickens, some of her chickens. Sometimes they just come in and say hi. Sometimes they tell me that they're doing fine, and sometimes they come with questions or issues or advising. But I would never get rid of my office hours, as much as it can be exhausting and I don't get things done when I want to. Me being available for those 12 hours a week at my desk means that I am present for you and you know I'm there for you, and it establishes such a great responsibility. I get a lot of grading done. So it helps me stay focused. I'm not wandering off and doing other things, but also students know I'm there. So I would never get rid of it.
Mine is probably cringeworthy, and I've never said it out loud to a group before today. If the federal Department of Education said, we're done with RSI, I would still do it, and I would still hold my instructors accountable for it. Those regular and substantive interaction guidelines, the best practices that digital learning provides to us with the checklist, you can even get certified, those make a difference. And in essence, that's what Michelle and Jennifer are talking about, is these high standards that separate what we do from a correspondence class. And I am, when I learned of them, it was like, oh no, another federal policy. And now I'm a big advocate and wouldn't give it up even if they told me I could.
All right.
That's it.
All right. I like it. I like it. Very different set of answers here. So that was the list of questions that we have. We've got a couple that came up as we're conversing in the chat. One that maybe won't surprise anyone here. And Jennifer, I'm sorry, you might have to turn your mic back on. How do you all prevent or deal with inappropriate AI use in assignments?
I'll just say really quick. I am not gonna play AI detective and like put it in a bunch of like readers to see if I can catch students. I have found a different way to approach this. And that is, and I really only worry about it in like writing reflections, I don't worry about it, but like writing assignments where there are citations. I have found the students who are using AI don't bother with the hallucinations. And so I download the Word document and I go straight to the references. If they're all hallucinations or most of them, I just stop grading. And that works really, really well. The other nice thing is if I open up all their references, even if I open them all up and they're not hallucinations, if I'm reading their writing assignment and something seems a little wonky, I've already got their references open and I can see, is it correct? Is it plagiarized? Did they just lift the sentence out and drop it in? So I just go to the references. It's easier, it's quicker. There's no denying this DOI doesn't point to the article you said it did. This DOI doesn't even exist. And so that's where I go with it instead of trying to use all those. There are lots of ways you can get around those detectors. And I tell students I'm not gonna fight with you. I'm not gonna have arguments. I'm just gonna turn it over to academic integrity. And if they say it's okay, I'll grade it and we'll move on. And that has helped quite a bit. I'm just very upfront about it.
I redesign the class. I have to redesign it every summer because workforce development changes. And so I ask AI to do all of my assignments. And if AI can do it, then I need to go back and look at my deliverable. And AI changes so quickly that is I could create something that didn't work. And within a year, it does work much quicker, but I'm not checking it every day. And much like Jennifer, I'm not in a place to try to chase people down and police that. I can only control my best effort to make assignments that are AI proof. So, for example, they've got an annotation document due this week. They could technically download the document, run it through AI, but we're not accepting any external submissions. Oh, it didn't work, so I'm just sending you my Word document. Because if they have to type everything AI told them back into the annotated document, they're going to learn something. They're going to get the gist of it. It's not ideal, but just by setting that standard up front, and then also just accepting that the best you can do is the best you can do, and don't hurt yourself trying to fix a problem that's not yours.
Again, I teach 35, so it's a whole lot easier for me to get to know my students and to get to know their writing. They do so much writing during the course of the semester that I can tell when it's off. I can tell when the way they've been writing all semester is not aligned with the way that they're writing currently. And so that's one of the pieces. But the other thing that I tell them is if you want to go and use AI, you're welcome to do so. All you have to do is download the entire chat and include it with your assignment. And that notion of being able to use it, and I put this in the chat, we start with their own, and then we go back and we talk about the ways in which they can enhance what they've already done using AI. And most of the time, what they find out is that AI doesn't do it any better than they do, especially on the first try. And so until they learn how to become better prompt engineers, the AI version of what they're doing in a very early low stakes assignment is not helpful. It doesn't solve their problems. In some ways, it actually creates more problems and more work for them. So that is kind of doing that up front has helped, and also talking to them about how they have a writing style and AI may not emulate their own writing style.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. I see that Barbara in the chat, you mentioned that you had a student with suspected AI use record a video explaining how she worked through the assignment. Would you like to speak more about that? That sounds interesting.
Sure. And actually, Jennifer's familiar because I actually had her watch the video with me. So we had a student who had been pretty strong all semester, but there were like some AI indicators, like the dash, what's it called? The longer dash. I'm blanking on what it's called, but it's like typical use in AI that people don't use that much unless they're, highly trained English writers and whatever. But it was pretty well done. So I started off, I didn't accuse her of AI use. I started off by saying, hey, I just need a little more clarification. The assignment was a data analysis. So they had to write a research question, pick from a very large publicly available data set and pick a couple variables of different types and answer the research question with their data by doing analysis, and then write up a report with interpretations. And so I said, I just need a little more clarification of how you chose your variables, and because she picked a complicated variable. That was a score that you had to create from a bunch of other variables that were given. And coincidentally, Jen had another student in a much lower level in her first biostatistics course who actually did use AI and picked that same variable. So it was kind of like, had she not brought that, I might not have questioned this particular student on that variable. At any rate. So I said, I need a little more clarification on how you chose your variables in your research question and then how you proceeded. And I said, you can either, write this up or record a video talking about it. And so she was clearly a little anxious, but spoke really well. You could see her decision process. She understood what she was doing. And, I showed the video to Jen and another colleague who teaches a different section of the class, the same class. And we all agreed she knew what she was doing. She was well versed in the topic. So then I wrote back and I said, hey, I just have there's some AI indicators in your document. Can you talk about why that might be? And she said, well, I used AI to kind of clean some of it up. And, so she explained, she used AI as a tool to improve your work, which is those of us who have, more AI knowledge might have done. She used it the way I would have used it if I was using it to kind of clean up my work at the end. She also works at a job in the field, and this particular variable is utilized in data collection where she works. And I checked LinkedIn to make sure that she indeed did have that job. So it was one of those things that was kind of uncomfortable, but we're pretty sure that the AI was used appropriately. And I did not have a specific AI statement in that particular course's syllabus at the time. So she earned full credit on the assignment after, we evaluated her video, et cetera.
I will just add, because I was involved in that it was a lot of time on Barbara's part, a lot to ferret that out. So, is it realistic every single time? That's the scary part.
And the same student is in that was my advanced epidemiology course. She's in my advanced biostatistics course this semester. So I was worried about getting off to a rough start in that next semester, but everything is fine. And, he just needs to cite if AI is used and how.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Barbara, for sharing. Since we are right at time, I will say, if you would like to stick around and ask a question, I'm sure some of us would love to hang out, but I would like to take a moment to make sure that we just give a huge thank you to Melissa, Jennifer, and Michelle for taking the time to share their wisdom and their resources with us during this conversation. It was so insightful and awesome. So thank you all so much for being here.